Good morning, everyone. Welcome to everyone on the third day of our Quantum Happy Fest from days 1 through 3. Today is a very different day. We have you up here at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, and there are a lot of computing activities happening up on the hill. We'll hear about that this morning. In particular, we also have Aqueous, a quantum simulation group, and you'll hear about that as well. To start the meeting, I'd like to call upon the Deputy Director of Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, Horst, for opening remarks.
Thank you, Irvin. Good morning. Welcome all to the lab. Glad to see that, there's a lot of enthusiasm still here after on day 3 of the workshop, so that's really speaks for Irvin's organization of getting the level of enthusiasm and energy up. I also want to thank you for figuring out how to find this place, take the bus or whatever else you had to do, or find your assigned parking, or even walk up the hill for good exercise, whatever you took to come up here. As Irvin said, I'm the Deputy Director and also the Chief Research Officer, and among many of the fun parts of my job, I'm responsible for the LDRD program and discretionary funding in general for the lab, so that means I'm a very popular person. So with that in mind, I want to, of course, stress that the quantum simulation project that Irvin and Johathan Carter later and others here will talk about has been a very high priority for us at the lab for 2 or 3 years already in terms of LDRD investments. So we have an LDRD program in new computing technologies that actually Johathan is leading, and I think in total probably we're not as big as some other labs, have invested of the order of say $2 million in that. I wanted to sort of add a bit more credibility to myself. So I've been tracking this for more than a decade. What I mean by this is that about a decade ago, Martin Gordon had a great paper where he basically showed that a quantum computer could be used for actually simulations in chemistry and material science with some co-authors. One of the co-authors was Gordy Rose, who then went on with D-Wave. So I followed D-Wave. When D-Wave became available, the big system, I actually tried to implement a graph partitioning algorithm on it, and then I gave up because it turned out that in order to map an unstructured graph on the D-Wave processor interconnect, you have to solve another NP-hard problem. So the graph mapping is as hard as graph partitioning, as probably you know. So you need to have another computer to map the graph on D-Wave. So I said, well, this is not ready yet for prime time. So I keep on tracking this with more personal interest, but I would consider myself an amateur dabbler here. But I'm very enthusiastic that this group is convening, and I'm actually back here to learn about quantum simulation. So with all this, I wish you a successful third day, and I hope you'll enjoy the lab. Maybe you had a chance to admire our new computing building. Johathan will talk about it. This has been keeping me also busy for the last decade to get this building in place. And if you capture me during lunch, I'll tell you all the lawsuits and all the other anecdotes about it. That's my not-so-fun part of the job. So with this, I'd like to introduce Johathan Carter, who is the Computing Sciences Deputy and also the lead for the new computing technology innovation and quantum and neuromorphic activities here at the lab.
Well, thank you, Horst. So I'd like to start by following Horst's welcome and also to thank Johathan for organizing such a great three-day meeting. I'm really happy that I see we haven't had much attrition and there are a lot of people joining us for this final day. I'd just like to spend a few minutes talking about the computing sciences organization. Okay, try it manually. So the mission of computing sciences, you can break it down into three parts. We want to have transformational impacts on science and society. We want to do that by developing new methods, new mathematics, and deploying new systems. We want to make that mathematics, those systems, as broadly available as possible. So the computing sciences program at the lab here consists of three kind of individual units. We have an R&D division led by David Brown, which has applied mathematics expertise, computer science, data science, and a mixture of all that with various domain scientists. We have the ESNet facility, which connects all the DOE labs and also provides the connectivity for the DOE labs into Europe for facilities like the LHC and CERN and things like that. And we also have the NERSC facility, which is a high-performance computing facility. It's the broadest, serves the broadest base of all the DOE computing facilities. Our strategy is arranged around addressing the disruptions we see in computing in the next 10 years. And I'll only have time really to talk about computing performance, but I want to stress that our overall strategy involves new math for more complex science problems and dealing with the data deluge which is coming from the latest generation of instruments and experimental apparatus. So the main plank of our computer performance strategy is engaging with the DOE's Exascale program. So the Exascale program has been through kind of a long gestation, and it's emerging now. There was an advisory committee to the Advanced Scientific Computing Research Office in the DOE just before Christmas, and the project lead gave a presentation here, and these are roughly the goals. So the idea is to deploy computing systems with more than 50 times, more computational capability than are currently deployed, but with the same kind of cost, size, and power footprint. So the power, as many of you know, for these systems is going through the roof, and no one will pay the power budget for a system that consumes a gigawatt of power or something like that. As well as developing the actual hardware, we want to develop an ecosystem of applications that will actually run on the hardware and software that will make it more easy to program. So our strategy here is to use our computer center NERSC as a vehicle to influence this project, to make sure that the Exascale machines that are developed and the software that is developed is the most broad, most accessible to a large number of scientific applications. And NERSC has a long history of addressing a very wide user base very successfully. And we hope to have an Exascale machine in place in there in about 2025. We also have a lot of leadership in the application space that's being developed for these Exascale machines. And these are collaborations between many divisions all across the lab, not just computing. Many of them are led from different divisions. For instance, the astrophysics project is being led by Dan Kaysen in nuclear science, and the cosmology project also being led from outside the division. So what are the dark clouds then, given I've painted this very rosy picture of simulation? So if you attended Monday and you listened to Chris Monroe's talk, he had a diagram kind of similar to this, except that it just showed the number of transistors on every Intel microprocessor from 75 or whatever it was to current. And this is a little bit more of a general diagram. It shows a lot of microprocessors from that era to now. You can see that basically this is last data is about 2014, 2015. Moore's law is still going strong. But you can see that vendors have taken a number of other strategies to deal with some of the engineering difficulties that have come along with increasing the clock rate more and more. And we see really that clock frequency has leveled off. It leveled off in about 2005. What the vendors did was they increased the number of cores on a chip, which it led to more performance, provided that you're willing to do the reprogramming that would take to exploit it. But in the next few years, Moore's law, at least in this current CMOS incarnation, is bound to end. Intel have postponed the Cannon Lake processor at 10 nanometers twice now, and we'll see if it appears in 2017 at all. So I'm really looking forward to having some data that actually shows this leveling off, if it actually ever does. So we have to think ahead, and what are we going to do about this? So as Horst mentioned, we have a novel computing technologies focus here at the lab. It was funded by internal seed money, the LDRD, and we focused on 3 areas. So we have the already funded main Exascale project. We have these 3 other projects that are looking ahead of that. The first is a post-Moore digital. So what are the technologies other than CMOS that we might deploy? Carbon nanotubes, different kinds of transistors. We also have a project that looks at brain-inspired computing, and we think that there might be some interesting applications for real-time, very low power, and obviously machine learning type applications. But the focus, obviously, of today is a program in developing quantum simulation or quantum computing. And we see that there are obvious candidates here in the DOE space. If we're looking at strongly correlated systems, there are many, many cases that the DOE wanted to do simulations of these materials where we think this is an obvious application area where quantum simulation could help. So what we've been trying to do here is we've been trying to build on the great base that we have in different divisions at the lab and bring them all together. So in the materials sciences division, Irfan Siddiqui, Dan Stamper-Kern, Hartmut Hafner, all have joint appointments and all experts in developing various experimental techniques that might be used as quantum computing devices or simulators. And also in the chemical sciences, we have Birgitta Whaley, who also has a very long-standing research effort in this area. We're bringing in some other areas too. So the Molecular Foundry is an expert in nanofabrication, and we hope to partner them with Irfan's lab to produce a next generation of superconducting qubits. More recently, we've been looking at using the lab's engineering and accelerator technology and applied physics programs to build custom classical electronics to help the scaling of these devices. And of course, we'll be collaborating strongly with the Center for Quantum Coherent Science, which has been inaugurated this week. So more of a, perhaps, a different view of that collaboration is we have this lovely new building that Horst mentioned also. It was also a long time coming, but there's space in this building for campus collaborations, for bringing people together. There's also a very large machine room floor, which we've just deployed a very large Cray system, which is based on Intel's latest KNL processor. And we hope to develop these kinds of layers of abstraction. And here, you know, I picked a superconducting qubit as the basis. I think maybe that's because Irfan takes me to the best places for lunch when I go down to see him at campus, so I had to highlight SE qubits. But in any case, you need to isolate the fundamental device technology, I think, a way to enable non-experts to come in and start to talk about the future of quantum simulators and where they might go. So this is very much our hope, that we're able to capitalize on the expertise we have here, bring everyone together, and really produce something very exciting. And I thank you for your